Hello, and welcome to another installment of Caribbean Business Podcast, brought to you by Assuage Business Development Limited. I'm your host, Rollocks, Director of Business Development and Sales at Assuage, where we help SMEs penetrate local and regional markets. To those of you again listening in from LinkedIn, YouTube, maybe you're viewing on Facebook, we are always happy. We've been happy. It's been great to have you with us. And we look forward to your comments, your recommendations, your suggestions, and we look forward to a very interactive and informative discussions. Just to give you a sense of what we're about here at Caribbean Business Podcast, the podcast seeks to provide a regular forum for discussion of issues pertinent to regional trade, highlight the significant role of regional service providers in economic growth and development, identify specific opportunities for exporting services interregionally and beyond, and provide information on how-tos of how we should export products and services. Today and every first and third Tuesday, we host key players in the export trade sector and SMEs across the region who will share from their experiences and expertise to help us navigate this world of business expansion through exporting. This evening, we put the spotlight on the importance of developing an export plan when entering the export market. The Inter-American Development Bank has identified this as a specific need in Caribbean and Latin American businesses. In a recent article, the bank emphasized the need for an export plan as a fundamental tool for enabling small and medium-sized enterprises in Latin America and the Caribbean to integrate more into the international market and to do so on better terms. The IDB acknowledged that a lack of organization and experience can mean that plans to expand into the international market do not prosper. To help us and to help SMEs fast-track their export planning this evening, we have yet again another expert planning panel with us this evening, who will give us insights on how-tos around export planning. So let's meet our panelists now.
Sharon Alexander. Sharon Alexander is an experienced sales and marketing professional with over 20 years in leadership positions and heads JLS Services Caribbean team. Sharon's experience is supported by her education and training in marketing and sales, including a master's degree from Heriot-Watt University, as well as professional certifications in various marketing disciplines, including PR and digital marketing. Linton Snowball. Linton E. Snowball is a senior consultant with JLS Services Caribbean. An agricultural engineer by training, Mr. Snowball has 18 years sales and marketing, business and general management experience. He is solutions-oriented and has a keen eye for identifying innovative products to solve business problems and consumer needs. Anthony Brand. Anthony has over 20 years experience in manufacturing, utilities, logistics, and private sector development, as well as expertise in trade-related technical assistance, business development, and human corporate capacity building through training and organization change management. As CEO and partner at Coverpoint RCM Business and Technology Solutions, Anthony engages SMEs, export development agencies, IPAs, and agricultural cooperatives in the CARIFORUM and Africa regions to expand international trade, including services and investment within the European Union.
Hello, good evening, fellow panelists. And Tony, I see that we had to emphasize, and we did it twice with you in the end there, just to emphasize your expertise. So it's a pleasure to have you all. Pleasure to have you here this evening.
Thank you for having us, Rawle.
Thank you.
Thank you. Nice to see you again, Rawle.
Excellent. I know, Anthony, you're almost like a fixture here with us, and it's always happy to have you. New with us, of course, is Sharon Alexander and Mr. Snowball of JLS. So great to have this expert team with us this evening. So we're gonna jump right in, if you please. And it's okay if we do the first name basis, right?
Of
That's quite
course.
fine.
Of course.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you. So we're talking about export planning, and I'm just throwing a general question out. When you hear what the IDB had to say, you follow comments made at the Export Development Agency and a lot of the other support agencies. And this is even outside of export planning. There seems to be a little challenge with planning from a lot of our SMEs to put an actual plan in place, to write it down, to make the note. We seem to prefer to operate outside of a planning framework. Has this been your experience?
I have seen that. We are actually working with a client and we had to slow them down because, you know, you're eager. You want to go, it's an adventure, not just in terms of revenue, in terms of a new market base. And they just want to get going. They want to jump on that plane and they want to go to Jamaica or Barbados or Guyana. And sometimes they want to do all. They want to do all. They think they can do all the markets simultaneously. And you have to slow them down to ensure they do it correctly, so that there's no wastage of resources, particularly not just time, but in terms of actual cash, you know. So yes, I've seen that many times, not just with SMEs. I've worked with large companies, and the CEO gets up and they have a great idea. They hear there's an opportunity somewhere and they go. And because they have more resources, maybe they're able to have that, you know, impromptu approach and the resources if they make an error. But at SME, they really can't afford to waste $20,000-$30,000 and then realize US and then they realize they've gotten it wrong, you know?
Yes.
I'm really glad that Sharon mentioned about the fact that like the larger companies are able to have the resources to rectify something when if the plan goes wrong. But indeed, like the plan, if you take careful time to plan properly, it will reduce the chances of you doing something wrong and having to do rework later on.
Correct.
Which will get you more expensive.
And to protect your reputation as well, because the way you enter speaks about your brand, you know, and you want to get it right. You want to look professional. You want to know that you know what you're about. So when you meet with whether distributors or whoever it is, you want to show them that you have a holistic plan as well, because as I said, it's part of protecting your brand.
Yes, and
thank you for that. So what about, yes, Linton, what has been your experience?
Yeah, and I was just adding that even for the larger companies now, they are waking up to the realization that cash, they're not so much awash with cash anymore. So
yes,
they have
correct.
to put the systems in place to ensure that they don't waste the stakeholders. I mean, especially those who are now gone public. Yeah, they are being scrutinized and being held responsible for whatever they do. So they have to manage the resources carefully.
Great. Yes, I can understand that. And it actually points out something. I heard another commentator indicate that in stable times, you find that planning did not have as much of an emphasis. But
Correct.
when we are dealing with, in fact, it's often referred to as VUCA times, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. So with all that the pandemic had ushered in, and now we have this war raging, you know, there's quite a lot of uncertainty. So would you say that in these times of uncertainty more than any other, planning is necessary?
I want to say yes, but I think it's important regardless, because you need to have a culture of planning. You can't do a start and stop. Your whole organization should have that culture of the way you approach whether it's export market, whether it's local market. And you can't change the entire culture overnight and say, well, because we're in dire straits, let's start when before to use, you know, to say you Vikivai before. But yes, of course, utilizing what Brian said, and Linton, when your resources are scarce, it becomes more evident. But I don't think it's more important to do so. I think it just becomes more evident that it must be done. You know, and that's the difference I would like to see.
Yes. one of the things I'm trying to put my finger on, before we get into what an actual plan entails, what a plan is about, is why is this? There seems to be this aversion to planning within the region, right? I heard quite a number of governments talk about SMEs not being able to access grants and funding, particularly with the challenges that the COVID has brought on, because so many of them don't have the business organized, their records are all over the place, they don't have a proper plan. Okay, and quite a lot of the funding required that you have this plan. So I know at Caribbean Export Development Agency, this issue of capacity building always comes up. And so I'm trying to figure out, why is there such an aversion? When you look outside, you seem to see the value and benefit of it.
And from my experience, I am not sure if they are against doing it. I think in terms of the skill set may not be there. A lot of these SMEs may be very good in terms of manufacturing. We even see it in local markets. They're very good in manufacturing, say, chairs. And, they go and they get a distributor in the local market, and the distributor may take over a lot of the market and to some extent the planning. Now, so when you say, let's do an export plan, and you use all these fancy words like capacity, evaluation, readiness, and they say, you know what, I am not too sure about that. I know that I could go and speak to Rawle and tell Rawle I want to sell my chairs.
Yes.
So I think part of it is training. And then I think at SMEs, there's a deficit of time, because they're small. They don't have a marketing department with an export arm and people coming out that's with a degree in marketing to advise them. So there's a time constraint as well. There's a resource constraint, and knowledge, of course, as I said.
Anything
I think there's also a constraint in terms of information, because, like, for instance, if you're doing like a really good export plan, your export plan should really be based upon facts about like the market size, the market structure, the competitors. And I think sometimes many SMEs are find it a bit difficult to sometimes get the information which they would actually need to create like a really good export plan. So this will be one of the constraints as well.
Yeah, I like that. I like that point, Anthony, and I wanted to stick a pin there because I'd like us to treat with it when we get into the third segment. This issue of market research and the availability of data, timely data. You understand? Because sometimes we get data that is 10 years old. So I love that point. But you were going to say something, Linton.
Yeah, and at the root of it, let's face it, a lot of these SMEs started out as a kind of mom and pop shop, or it may be coming out of an idea that was started part time while they were on a job, and so they something was developed, a product was manufactured, processed, or something to meet a need, or just something that they like, and it evolved, and now it becomes something that is good, need to fit in the business space, or somebody who wants to transition out of being employed into a business. But I mean, sharing that time, it becomes a challenge, and so all the steps, all of what needs to be done to attract, as you mentioned, the investment, the funding from the financial institution may have been overlooked in the initial step, and then I mean, really, you're catching a tail later on, now trying to just keep things going. Whereas, and so it leads me to another point with that. Really, in the region, we don't really have a culture that encourages entrepreneurship and people to go into business, and hence from day one leaving UE that, look, this is what I'm going to do. Just looking back the other day, I was thinking back in my own undergrad training in engineering. I did one business course, and it was something in finance. So I mean, anything else I had to learn along the way as to what business is. I mean, you're going to put all of the tough technical skills to work, but how does it make sense in a business setting where at the end of the day it's a profit and loss situation? It's not it's your product must be good, yes, but if it's not profitable. And so I mean, we really need to, in this space, create that kind of culture where business is important, because if you check in the other spaces where we're buying from, probably, and who are exporting into the region, they not only look at the product, but they look at all of the factors of export that we're going to be looking at now.
Yes.
To get it into our space and to get it here competitively.
I'm happy you mentioned that. I was sharing with someone recently who does export into China, and they were saying that these Chinese have 20 and 30 and 40-year plans. You understand? So, so I mean, the kind of vantage point that they are taking things from is really something else. But there's another issue that I recognize, right? And I don't know if it's maybe there's also a lack of patience with the planning process, right? Because I remember one agency, I wouldn't call the name, talking about setting up a trade mission to one of the French islands, and all this planning was taking place. And meanwhile, while doing all that, some business persons went with a suitcase into the island, sold stuff, came back, while they were planning. You understand? So I don't know if you've seen that as well.
Yes, I have seen that, and I have done business like that previously as well. You just jump on a plane and you hope for the best.
Yes.
And sometimes it depends on the product. If it's an industrial product, it may work. There may be just a few players, so you can just fly across and say, I'm talking to Rawle from X paint company, and So remember, a lot of entrepreneurs, there's a passion, there's a lot of fire in them. So there's, as I think Linton mentioned, the patience, or you mentioned as well. The patience, I mean, I have seen that. I work for a fairly large company, and I would do this cost benefit analysis, and as you said, plans, and the guy was like, why are you doing all of that? He said to me, I would do 10 plans, or I would introduce 10 new things, whether markets or products, and say 3 may fail, and the 7 would pay for the 3 that fail, while you still crunching numbers,
Yes.
So,
yes,
and his business is quite successful using that model.
Yes. So I mean, nonetheless, I think we've all identified that planning is important. Planning is valuable, particularly when we look at export planning, right? So what then is an export plan? How would you define an export plan? Because we hear about business plans, we hear about strategic plans, we hear about operational plans. Where does an export plan fit into the mix?
Export plan has to be. Go ahead, Brand.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, to me, an export plan is part of the company's business plan.
Yes, correct.
It's the plan which indicates, okay, how this company intends to enter a foreign market and how they intend to operate and to obtain revenue by operating in that market. But this export plan should be part of their overall business plan.
Okay, so there should be some integration or connection.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear the way Brand defined it, because it must be part of your entire. It can't be a standalone. It must be part of everything, because you are sharing resources, including human capital, not just money. And if you have it as a standalone, you realize, okay, I may not have the resources because somebody else in the company has a big local plan, right? Or a product development plan. And you're sharing resources. So you need to have it holistically. So it could be a little seamless, more seamless.
What advice would you give to SMEs then in terms of developing an export plan? Are there some prerequisites? So for example, you hear you talk about export readiness, all right?
Yeah, I was going to mention that.
Can I get into business today and say, okay, I want to go to Jamaica and do a product. Let me just start developing an export plan. What would be some prerequisites?
Brian and I actually worked with Caribbean Export Development Agency a few years ago. And we worked with, I think, Brian, 18 female entrepreneurs. They were different stages. They were at different stages in terms of their readiness. And sometimes they did not comprehend that. And it goes back to what I was saying, that I want to go Guyana, I want to go Jamaica, I want to go Barbados. I say, okay, tell me about your export department. No, it's just me. Tell me about your production capacity. They have not evaluated that. Tell me about if you had to invest in more inventory. Do you have the working capital to do that? They have not thought about that. As a matter of fact, I remember getting, I want to use the word buff, because I got this client into Price Mart, Jamaica, and I was excited. The client was saying, I'm not ready for that. But based on what we were told, they wanted to get into free markets. And we shall, and you know what, we need to go back and do that evaluation in terms of when you say you're ready for export, what are you really ready for? You know?
Yes. Anything you care to add there, Linton?
You see, as we're saying, we're looking at this as an extension of what you're doing. So, and if we put it all the way back to where we started with the whole idea of planning, if you never really did set out you set your business plan in place, yes, and so develop a model that you're going to operate on. If you, even in your local market, don't even decide how you're going to market your products, yeah, it's going to be a challenge now when you're going to be stepping beyond there. You don't even know, so you don't, as Sharon is saying, you don't understand your basic capacities that you have to do what you're currently doing, so that you know, okay, if I'm going to take on another market, how do I ramp up? How do I scale my business to facilitate the additional demands that are going to
Demands.
come? So everybody like my product when it goes, and as Sharon pointed out in her example, um, yes, they're ready to buy, but you're not ready to produce.
Yes.
So if you can get away with it in your local space, planning is going to become very critical when you think about going into your export space. And if you don't understand your product and know how it works, because some people who want to export don't really understand their products. I mean,
Yes.
I mean,
Yes. Miss Linton, would you say, I see we have an offline submission
Yes.
here, but before we get to it, would you say that success in the local market is a prerequisite before you start thinking about the export market?
you know what? It sets the tone very well for what you're going to do, because you're able to get rid of the kinks. You're able to test it in your space and make corrections if needs be, so that when time to go into a market, because remember now we have to deal with issues of transit time. You have to deal with issues of customs and all of those things. You have to deal with licensing issues, maybe depending on the product you're dealing with. So you would have fixed all of the issues in your local space, so that when you're going to take another space, and in fact you have the success, I mean, of selling in your market. I mean, why on earth
Yes.
you're going to be bringing your good product to me, and you're not coming with a track record to say that your neighbors, the guys right in your space, love it? It's going to be a little
Yes.
challenging.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
I agree. There's some products that you may be able to go to that may be more suited to an export market than your local market. So you have, but that's a small number of products. So I agree with Linton. And when I'm evaluating a new market and I'm talking to someone, they normally ask me that question. Tell me about your local market. And there's some, say for example, you have a food-based type product. When I say you're in massy stores or you're in extra foods, or you're in leading supermarkets, you could see the confidence building because there's a mass in Guyana. I mean, there's a massive distribution in Jamaica. So, they kind of say, okay, it means that you have put in the work and you've been around and you know what you're about, because you're not going to get into a massive store on extra food or a price mart just like that. So
Yes.
it helps with your own branding. And Linton is quite correct that if you have not worked out your bugs in your local market, some people, I mean, there's some people, they want to export because they're doing poorly in the local market. Do you know that? This thing not selling in Trinidad. Let me try Guyana. Let me try Jamaica. But why is it not selling? There's some things, as Linton said, you may need to fix here. Don't
Yes.
take your challenges to another country where you have to
Yes.
actually utilize more resources. So Linton is 100% correct.
Anything you
I
care to add there,
I
Anthony?
generally agree that having produced for like the local market will give the entrepreneur more experience in understanding their product and how it works and like what they have to do in order to make it successful in the market before going to export internationally. I do know of some few examples of like
Yes.
new product launches which have launched in
The
many
export
markets
market.
simultaneously.
Yes.
But generally,
Yes.
it's important to gain experience in your local market first.
So would you say, those of you listening in, you may not know what doubles is, but it's a roadside food that we consume here in Trinidad and Tobago. So when you see the vendor eating his own doubles, that's a good indication, right? That,
Correct.
I can try this doubles too, right?
Yes.
So I get the picture, right? So we want to get into, and I'm going to address the viewer's question there when we come into the third segment. So please make a note of the issue of whether or not you should hire someone or try it yourself to develop a plan. We're going to address it, but we want to get into some of the components, right? What are some of the key components of an export plan that one should consider, that's important for any SME? But before we jump into that, we want to hear from our sponsors. All right, just a little word from our sponsors. We need to pay some bills, and we'll be right back to address the components of an export plan.
Amplify your voice. Enhance your marketing communication with infomercials, podcast recorded presentations, and live streamed programs. To learn more, visit www.launchpadmedia.agency or call 1-868-272-1987. Amplify your voice with Launchpad Media.
So much Launchpad Media, the ones that make this program possible, and I've been doing a tremendous job in helping get the message out. So before we took that break, we were just about to get into the key components, right? What are some of the key components of an export plan that an SME must consider?
What is the first thing? The process of preparing the export plan is almost as important as the export plan itself. So the document is important, so you have a common platform and you all speak in the same language. But the process in terms of auditing, so we're going to start with the first step. You should identify the product or service you want to export, right? It may seem like, this is simple. Yeah, I know what I want to export, but not. You may have a basket of goods, and you have to select one that you think that you have the capacity to expand and can fit easily into a new market. The other thing you need to do is conduct some market research. And this is something that JLS will do. So for example, JLS, we have a member who is based from Guyana. We have Linton, who is in Jamaica. And we just did something where Linton actually went on the ground, visited all the supermarkets, got pricing, got the competitor analysis, and fed that back to the client. So when they were doing their marketing plan, they knew, for example, what pricing strategy they should utilize. You should also define a strategy to find your buyers. You should determine how are you going to enter the market. And there are many steps. Linton actually worked with me. Hold on a second. Yeah, so Linton actually worked with me. I'm trying not to call the name of the company. It's one of my favorite places to be, so it's hard to not to mention. But we worked in a company where we started with direct export, where we were just, shipping. And then Linton came in and we set up a warehouse where the goods were going to the warehouse, and then we were distributing to the consumer, to the hardware stores and then the consumer. Both strategies had their place. The first strategy allowed us to learn the market at a low cost, and if we failed, it was easy to retreat. Once we knew the market a little better, we were able to implement second stage, and we entered a different way. And we moved from doing 1 40-foot container every few weeks to Linton, about 4 containers a week?
4, 5, and sometimes up to 10.
Yes, containers. But you have to we couldn't jump to having a warehouse, because that was an extreme. That was in terms of resources, right? So you have to know how are you going to enter the market. You may say, if it's a fast-moving consumer good, you may say, hey, I want to get a distributor because they have the experience in the market. You may say, I want to get an export rep. An export rep is someone who may not take possession of your goods, but they're representing you, making sure that your goods are flowing as it should. So there's several steps you need to do. And you mentioned, I don't know if Brian wants to go into more detail with this. You mentioned export readiness. And there's several components to that. from finance to HR to do you have all the various quality control checks in place that may be required for Barbados versus Jamaica? Linton, just you can probably help me here in terms of a product we're working on in terms of Jamaica and some of the things that you would have to do. And you have to know these things because you don't want to enter a market and realize plantain, for example, that you can't ship plantain in its raw form to Jamaica, you know? So there is research and readiness and so many other elements. And I think someone asked, should you get someone to help you? And my answer is yes. And it's a soft yes. Because it's not my plan. It's not GLS plan. It's not Coverpoint's plan. It's your plan. We are just going to ask you the very hard questions and we're going to walk you through some of the steps. But at the end of the day, you determine how you want to enter because you know your product best and you know what risk you're prepared to take. And you can't delegate that to someone.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. But as you mentioned risk. Is that a significant component of the plan? Either Anthony or Linton, you could probably chime in. The whole issue of risk management.
Yeah, because because you have and hence you have to factor now all of the things you're going to market. So, for example, the example Sharon looked at earlier, the product was such that after we were in the market with one container, and we went up to 4. The nature of the product allow for that kind of stuff. The reality is, at the end of the day, Sharon, if it failed, we load it back onto a container and we take it back home, right? But if you're dealing with other products now, especially perishable, and in the region we have quite a number of those products that we move around, perishable items. I can think of some products now that would want to move through the market, especially in the region, but it may require cold storage. Yeah. No, you're going to have to understand how do you move those kind of products. Yes, it is desired at the other end, but in your local market, it's easy for you to handle. Are there persons in the market or companies, distributors, say in the market that you're going into that will be able to take this product and handle it the same way you handle it, so that it gets to the customer, the end user, at the same quality that it basically left your warehouse. So those kind of things you have to understand them. You have to understand how it works. You have to understand logistics is going to be critical for your product and what it is.
Could you elaborate there, Linton? Because some of our viewers may not understand. When you say logistics, what are you referring to there?
It's basically how you move your product to your customer in the end market. So a container of goods leaving Jamaica, Sharon, I'm not going to say Trinidad, leaving Jamaica to come to you in Trinidad, we're going to have to basically the basics. It's going to have to come by air or sea. Yes. So if it's a container load, it can't be air. So it's going to have to be sea. So you're going to have to understand what all the Incoterm requirements for moving goods between Jamaica and Trinidad.
Linton, you want to explain?
I lost it there.
Do you want to explain Incoterms? You said Incoterms.
All right.
Some people may not.
Yeah. So we're talking about the basics of all of those things along the way really is the costings that are going to be incurred. Yes, the cost to load it on the container, the cost, because whereas you're selling in your local market, you just somebody, your customer come to pick up, or you load it on a truck, you probably load it for free and you deliver it to your customer. But now you're talking export. So you're going to have to load onto a container. There's a cost for the container. There's a cost for using the port. There's a cost for the ship carrying it to its destination. When it get to its destination, there are costs along the way to offload off the boat. Yeah, I'm being very practical here with it. There are costs to offload it off the boat. There are costs to take it into storage. There may be duties that are applied. There are going to be storage fees if for some reason the guy at the other end can't take it within the 4 or 5 days that are allowed, and there is a cost to get it into your warehouse.
Yes,
So all of those things have to be factored, have to be costed into what you're doing, so that and so saying so much now I probably even forget the question.
Yeah, I think we got it. One of the things I wanted to add to Linton is, and maybe I don't know if Anthony you can address this. Is it also important to understand these trade arrangements and moving stuff from one destination to another? I mean, within the Caribbean is one thing, but if we're going outside, how important is understanding these trade relationships and agreements?
I think it's definitely important role, because when you understand the trade agreements, as Linton mentioned, these trade agreements will actually govern the way or the method through which your goods are actually arriving into the foreign market. So, for example, the Caribbean region, we have an economic partnership agreement with the European Union. This means that goods which originate in the CARIFORUM region can, with some exceptions, enter the European Union at zero or very little tariff. So the exporter needs to know this and needs to factor this in, so that when they actually go ahead and they ship the goods, for example, from Trinidad to Europe, then it is understood, okay, well, these goods, are they being cleared by customs? Are they being cleared with zero tariffs? Are they being cleared under the terms of the EPA? Because this, of course, will affect the end price of the goods. If you send a good from Trinidad and the tariff is 10%, then it will be 10% more when it arrives in let's say in Belgium, for example. But if it's shipped under and cleared by customs under the EPA and zero tariff is charged, then it could be 10% less. This is 10% less, which actually can be passed on to the distributor, which in the end it goes on to the customer, which means that at the end of the day, the price of the good will be cheaper for the end consumer, which of course makes it more competitive.
I understand one of the things that, as you were talking about that and foreign markets is the issue of standards. And, once you begin to lift yourself out of the local domain, I mean, even in the local domain, there are standards. But as you go beyond, for example, I heard a story of someone exporting wine. Now, when we say wine in Trinidad and Tobago and the region, it may have a particular meaning. We have all kinds of wines. We have wines that we make from local fruits, and we call it wine. So this particular person sent these wines to the USA. It was held at the port, it was dumped, and they had to pay for it as well. They had to pay for the storage and dumping. So it cost them. So this whole idea of standards, how is important is it when you're putting together your export plan?
So it's very important. It's very important to understand what are the standards for importation with respect, particularly, for example, with food, with drink. What are not only the standards in terms of the actual quality of the product itself, but for instance, these standards actually apply to the labeling of the products. Correct. There are some countries where, in order for it to be, for example, in Belgium, if you have to put a product on the shelf in Belgium, legally you are obliged to have the label in both French and Dutch, which are the local languages here. So this means that you need to take this into consideration. Does it mean that you will actually print your entire label in French and Dutch? Would it mean that you're actually going to focus more on the French part of the country where you just have to put it in French, or do you want to do the entire country? Means you put it in French and Dutch, which will maybe a higher cost? Or, for instance, will you just stick a little white label on your current product packaging, current product labeling in French and Dutch, and then and see how the market responds to it.
Yeah.
So it's very
I
important
mean,
to understand all the standards.
a lot of this speaks to the issue of the need for research. And
Yes.
I hear a lot of SMEs saying that, research is so expensive and so time consuming. But does it have to be, are there easy ways of doing this research? What would you advise, any of you on the panel here, advise to someone who is contemplating getting into a market? And how do they do this research in a way that's affordable and saves them time?
I would suggest that that the SME turns to the export agencies in the country as a first step to see what market research information they can obtain from them. For example, Export TT, Caribbean Export, the ITC, that's the International Trade Center. They have research tools which can be available freely or at a very, very low cost to SMEs. And these
Oh,
are good
great.
sources of information.
Yeah, I do recall one of the region's agriculture development banks having actual business plan templates. So they have
Yes.
certain areas that were already researched so that you don't have to do that, and they have templates to build the plan, right? So
Correct.
I hear you on that. Yeah. Anything else to help SMEs in
It's
terms of getting the research done?
for right. So to help our exporters here in Jamaica, we have Jampro, Jamaica Product Productivity Development Center. They help prepare SMEs for export, and we also have the JMEA. In fact, there's a merger now of Jamaica Export Association and Jamaica Manufacturers Association. They've merged under one group, and they help their members to prepare for exports. They have seminars. In fact, there's some amount of guidance that they can get. And I mean, if we put a shameless plug in there, then we'd say come to JLS. I mean, we are going
Sure.
to help to guide you, right, Sharon?
Yes,
Yes.
because Linton is quite correct. I mean, I think at no almost minimal cost you were able to determine, and we use the same example of planting. That the entire container or the entire container could have been pulled because we put planting in it. And if Linton didn't do the research and realize, you know what, we can't send these products, there would have been a significant cost to it.
Yes. Yes.
So
Well, panelists, there's so much that we've covered. We've covered quite a distance in this short time. We just have a couple minutes really to wrap up. So, but I think there's so much that came out of it, or discussion here about all that goes into it. And one of the things I didn't want to leave our viewers with this sense of being, wow, all of this. I
yes.
mean, can I really, what would you say to encourage those persons who are getting into the export market? They want to develop the export plans. What would you say? What word of encouragement would you leave with those listening in, whether you're on your YouTube or Facebook or LinkedIn? And we really love that you spend the time with us. What would you say to them, maybe in your own closing remarks? And you can add anything that you want to say in your closing remarks to help encourage them to make the step forward to get the export plans done.
I would say networking. There are a lot of people who would have done it before you, so you can network with largest companies and get some information from their experience. As Brown would have indicated, you can go to Export TT. There are several avenues you can utilize. Yes, you could use consultants as well. But I would start with networking. I would start with utilizing secondary data, the export agencies. You can't get a lot from that. And you know what? Keep it simple. As much as we have gone through quite a lot in terms of explaining, you have to keep it simple where your staff yourself can actually utilize the export plan. So that's what I would say.
Thank you very much, Sharon, for those comments. Anthony or Linton, who'll be next? Linton?
Yeah. So it's just like anything in life. You're going to have, what your goal is. My intention is to export. I mean, we have the internet at our disposal, and it is flooding with information. Some of it good, some of it not so good. And if you have the right network, and if you do your basic research, if you realize it's a little beyond you, then I mean, because you're the producer, you probably don't have the time. Find a good consultant like JLS who has, I mean, expertise to guide you along the way, to hold your hand, and to in a modular way help you to take on the bits and pieces to make your export experience as good as your local business experience is. Yeah, can be very
Thank you.
meaningful.
Thank you very much, Linton. And Anthony, over to you to round it off for us.
Just as a final word of encouragement, I would encourage exporters desirous of entering foreign markets to aim big, believe in yourselves, shoot for the moon, and even if you fail, you'll fall among the stars.
Excellent. That's putting it very succinctly there, Anthony. So thank you very much to our panel. It was really great having you and getting a lot of insights from you, Anthony, Sharon, and Linton. And of course, Launchpad Media. Thank you as always for helping us on the production end. Upcoming, we do have a focus on Barbados, so you don't want to miss that. We're going to delve a little bit into the Barbados market, or as we say, the Bajan market, and to learn a little bit about what are the opportunities there. So check us out on LinkedIn, YouTube, or Facebook. Please like and share. To contribute to our discussion, you can reach out to us via email at assuagebdc@gmail.com. That's assuagebdc@gmail.com. But also check us out on the website at www.assuagebusinessdevelopment.com. There's lots more you can find there, lots to help you on your export journey. And again, thank you very much. And until we meet again next time, think regional, act global.